In the spirit of my 14-year-old self, who thought she was pretty unique for playing PlayStation games, hating pop music, and wearing baggy black clothes, this boss ranking will not be like the other boss rankings. Why? Well, because I cheated the game, naturally. You see, in the 2009 release of Demon's Souls, an exploit was uncovered whereby the user could back out of certain dialogue choices when speaking to Stockpile Thomas using the Nexial binding, trick the game into some weird middle state, return to him, confirm the Nexial binding, and then duplicate themselves 99 of any item. This would work for any stackable item, including boss souls. It was an easy trick to pick up and memorize, so with the right dedication, you could be sitting on a few hundred levels after only the first boss, as Thomas is available right from the beginning of the game. In my case, those levels could be directed into intelligence, health, and stamina, thus forming the biggest trump card, the biggest counter, to almost any threat Demon's Souls could throw at you. A magic build. Almost every boss was either weak to magic, or lacked the ranged ability to properly deal with a magic build, meaning that it trivialized almost every encounter. Or almost every encounter. Essentially, I'd become a glass cannon. With 60 int, I had the capacity to kill almost any minor enemy in a single hit, and most bosses could be turned over in a few seconds. However, with my floaty dress and pretty crown, I too was capable of being killed in a single hit by most enemies. This meant that, as long as I didn't get hit, I could fly through the game. But I had only just discovered the Souls series, and so no matter how much stockpile prep I did, I was bound to get hurt eventually. So, since FromSoft never patched this glaring exploit during the entire lifecycle of Demon's Souls, we can safely assume that it's an intended feature, just hidden behind a little bit of dialogue interference and some general disrespect for the intended play. If it wasn't patched as a bug, as so many exploits have been, then I officially label it a feature, in lieu of being able to summon, since the close of the servers in 2018. However, I did set myself a level cap. I could power level to 120 in one go, but no higher, and that level had to sustain me for my entire playthrough. With that being said, this is how I found the bosses from easiest to hardest. You might be surprised to know that I'm not actually entirely sure what the Leechmonger looks like. I arrived in the Valley of Defilement with Fireball, a ranged fire spell, and 99 Old Spice, and then spent the better part of a few minutes slinging ranged magic attacks down into his pit as he swung around wildly. And I had my gamma set way too low, so he looked like a very angry scribble. Leechmonger is an absolute pushover, because despite his ability to regenerate health at a fairly alarming rate, his attacks cannot outpace the damage of my Fireball Fury! Oh, sorry. I actually wrote Fireball Flurry? Never mind. I like it. I'm keeping that in. He's also basically a melee fighter, wielding two massive arms made of leeches, I guess, with some extremely limited ranged attacks that were probably added last minute when they realised he's absolutely fucked if a magic user walks through that door. His music's pretty dope too. I used it in a D&D session later down the line for a boss encounter, but boss encounters really drag on in D&D, and after about 20 minutes I could tell everyone was getting really sick of the music. But out of sheer sunken cost fallacy, I felt too awkward to change it, so I just let it play. Second from the bottom is King ALLANT, and believe me, I would be confused too. It's because of his run-up. During my travels, I ended up having to re-access the old one after teleporting back to the Nexus. I was following a really specific trophy guide, so I probably needed to do some cleanup or maybe grab a few things from Stockpile T, but essentially, after getting transported down in a cutscene, I had to teleport back out and up to the Nexus again. At this point, I attempted to access the old one again by just jumping down into the pit, assuming it would work similarly to FireLink Shrine, where you could just sort of yeet yourself into the abyss and safely land in the kiln. It doesn't work. You just die. I don't even really remember his moveset. Normally I would walk in and just take pot shots from the door, but I know I was stood behind him at one point, and I remember panicking a bit about my HP. It was all a bit of a blur, honestly. I don't even remember exactly what he looks like besides some writhing, slimy mass. Just some weird sewer dog. Do sewer dogs exist? Are they a thing? Or are they just rats? For all his badassery in his opening cutscene, the old hero is a joke against the magic build. I think he took 3 hits to kill with the Firestorm spell, and each hit stunned him too, so I've actually never seen a single move that this guy can use. I had heard a lot about the old hero before I started playing Demon Souls, and I was actually very nervous about getting over to him, especially considering the area preceding the old hero is one of the hardest parts of this whole game, even on standard or white world tendency, and it's very hard. After spawning, I would just cane it to the boss fog. Even at level 120, the attacks of Grim Reaper enemies would one-shot kill me. And even charging full pelt through the area to get to the boss fog, it probably took a good 10 attempts to actually get to the boss fog. Although once I was there, it was fine. Also, this area reminds me of the Bladestone grind, and I can't talk about this, Falling into the same splattergory as the old hero, this guy is so weak to magic that this fight can be done in only a couple of seconds. It took probably 2 or 3 firestorms to sort him out, during which he was so staggered that, as with the old hero, I saw nothing of his moveset before he died in a raging inferno. Apparently, if you save and bring along Bior of the Twin Fangs, the Penetrator will focus entirely on him and completely ignore you during the fight. This is incredible, and it offers even more of an opportunity to just wail on him while he wastes his time. Considering the gauntlet you have to run through just to have a go at this guy, I genuinely assumed he would give me a real run for my money. Also, Penetrator? I mean, it could be a cool name in theory, but nothing exists in a vacuum, and I find it impossible to believe that the localization team had no idea his name could, and would, be so misconstrued. It was Atlas, right? Or Sega? Either way, not the most socially aware crew around. Maybe they underestimated their audience's propensity for sex jokes. So, as any magic build will come to learn along the course of their Demon Souls journey, set-piece bosses are a major complication for anyone wishing to conquer Boletaria with a skip in their step and a soul arrow on their fingertips. Dragon God is one such boss, requiring you to destroy debris as you sneak through his arena to activate 2 enormous ballista. I think magic works to destroy the debris, but honestly I could never get it to, and ended up just whacking out some huge halberd and going to town.
Long
I actually died quite a few times on both of the 2 runs I did, probably due to a combination of my own lack of talent, impatience, and unwillingness to learn. Luckily I didn't get fried by the classic nose fire he starts dishing out after you've knocked him down for good, because you can just yeet a few soul spears from a nice safe distance. Gotta count your blessings, I suppose. I know a lot of people don't really like this boss, but I think he's neat.
I just think they're neat.
Storm King sits in a similar category to the Dragon God, wherein any build you have goes completely out the window in lieu of Storm Ruler, some crazy sword that splits the sky. And giants, apparently, according to Dark Souls 3. I suppose maybe you could use magic, but honestly I never tested. The Storm Ruler gets the job done, and the harpoons fired by the smaller mantas, the real danger here, will be flying at you regardless. So you may as well. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, and when balls deep in the Shrine of Storms, grab yourself a ceremonial sword and kill the angry pancake in the sky. But honestly, those smaller mantas are really annoying. So many times I'd be minding my own business, charging a storm attack, or diving behind some bricks, and I'd get sniped with some huge harpoon by some smug floaty bitch. And can I just say, they drop their cloudstone out of bounds almost constantly. I almost lost my temper with that grind. Don't even get me started on the crystal lizards, it is not the time, nor the place right now to revisit that trauma. Even at level 120, many of the attacks, especially a few of the Storm King's specials, killed me in a single hit, so I ended up just squatting in the little ruined hut and having a cry. Well, what could I expect, really? I played this post-server outage, so I missed out on the absolute banter of fighting a real person for the Golden Crown. Cloth? Hat? I mean, it's still really cool to have an NPC champion summoned, but he was a bit relentless. He just chased me around the room in circles at my exact running speed, casting homing soul mass constantly without needing to pause, whereas my stamina was finite, and I really struggled to keep him at arm's length while still casting my own magic. It was a taxing fight in that sense, but more on my athleticism than any actual skill or strategy. It's a cool hat too, the genesis of Fashion Souls was here. The fight honestly could have done with having a few more chairs or bits of furniture to break up the aggro, maybe a tasteful armoire or a lovely pine wardrobe. Just to put some distance between me and him. His unlimited stamina made him so beefy, and the fight got pretty stressful towards the end. This classic OG of gaming was the only boss I had to fight legit before I could dupe my souls. Therefore, it was a terrifying war of attrition, won mainly through firebombs and partially through panic. Luckily the boss gate opens right in front of the archstone, so you don't need to run 400 miles to get back, but it's still a stress considering the defense of this boss comparably, being surrounded by, well, a phalanx of shields. She's super weak to fire, but I didn't have enough bombs to finish the job, so I ended up just pelting her with soul arrows and ducking behind pillars for a good portion of the fight. Phalanx is a very easy transition into the main game, and definitely not reflective of the kind of terrifying, punishing danger you can expect to face with some of the later bosses and areas. I think the first time I played this game, I sat cross-legged on the industrial carpet of my old university house with my friends Tom and Louis. I died quite a lot, but coming by on the magic build playthrough, she went by with barely a hitch. I guess the degree was worth something after all. I only did the tutorial for this game once, and like most Souls noobs, I died a humiliating death to Vanguard, and since then I've skipped the tutorial every time. So technically, he's the only boss in the entire Souls series that I've never beaten, which is quite a high honour all things considered. He's pissed at the Shrine of Storms though. I remember him so clearly. You spawn in the shrine and toddle up this great big hill, past a bunch of roly skeletons, marvelling at this ruined behemoth, this ancient temple built to one of the gods long forgotten, peppered with rubble and wartime fixtures, lost in time and memory and... oh shit! There he was, so proud and unsolicited, like a schmeat pic in your Discord DMs. I was actually a little intimidated by his presence as he towered over his neighbouring enemies and... oh! Yeah, no, I'm level 120. He was a pushover. He's also got an absolute banger of an OST. It might only be like 2 notes, but it sticks in my head and I often find myself humming it while I clean my kitchen at 2 AM. Now, I don't mean to sound too trendy, but this dirty boy is one big chungus. Sorry. I can never figure out how his anatomy works, and in the dark of his arena it hardly matters. It's like his head juts out at a weird angle and he's got one big arm. It's a weird one. The lore even suggests that he and the Leechmonger were originally 2 female knights that came from Maiden ASTRAEA and died horribly, so actually I don't know why I'm calling them he. Okay, this dirty bitch woman killed me maybe once. She's shockingly heavy hitting. That's hardly the problem though. For those of you who haven't played the game and are watching this out of a vicarious voyeurism, the Valley of Defilement is a proto-Blighttown, and a truly horrible map. It's grueling. The run between Leechmonger and Dirty Colossus was the hardest part of the game for me. It took me several hours of attempts on my first playthrough, and I dread returning to it in the remaster. Did you know that the big masked dudes are weak to fire? I didn't. I was pelting them with firestorms all day long and taking a centimetre off their health each time, and yet that was their weakness! They're just built like brick shithouses, and coming back here in pure Black World tendency is a trial. Celine Villand was the bane of my playthrough, but years later I learned that she actually has supreme magic resist armor, so I guess that's on me really. Yeah, this guy is genuinely in the top 10. What of it? As with the Storm King and the Dragon God, there's a very particular way you need to fight this fiend. His body is immune to all damage, but he has a weak spot on his side. His other cleaver has somehow accidentally become embedded in his own torso for some reason. You need to hit that until he falls over basically, at which point you need to attack his head, i.e. the tiny bird in the weird cage that seems to be controlling him like an automaton. This boss is a really weird one when you try to describe it, but I promise the design is cool. And his boss fight is even a little intimidating, the way you crash through the floor and awkwardly land in his lap. When I played, I very painstakingly knocked him over, but then tried to firestorm his head and somehow missed, so he just stood up again and flattened me. For a first boss, he is shockingly tanky, and I did end up dying a few times due to mistiming rolls or getting cornered in his mini arena. I love the concept though, and I wish he'd been explored more. I think that about a lot of these bosses, they just fail to scratch the curiosity itch, and there was just never enough lore to satisfy me. Like, I know that's the intention, but god damn, it's been years, and I still think about this. Now, pardon me while I fangirl, but oh my god! The Fool's Idol is one of the prettiest and coolest boss designs in the entire Souls series. Her hair is great, her dress is super cute, her tattoos are cool, and having 4 arms would be awesome. She just looks fantastic, and oh my god, I wish I was her. Anyway, the unfortunate truth of this boss fight is that I knew the tricks before I even started the game. I knew that the puppet master needed to be killed before the fight to prevent her from being resurrected. I knew that the fake idols shoot smaller soul arrows, and I knew that the people in the church always bow to the real idol. If it wasn't for these 3 facts, she probably wouldn't have been so easy to beat. Even at level 120, she can be surprisingly formidable. I spent a lot of time ducking behind pillars because a clean shot from one of her soul spears would slice my health in half. I didn't die to her, but it got pretty close a handful of times. Luckily, she's just as fragile as me. I mean my character. The hardest component of this fight is the Archer Squad. If it wasn't for them, this guy would be a literal pushover. Please laugh. My self-worth rides on it. For the uninitiated, the basic premise of this fight is that when you enter the arena, you face this enormous lumbering boss and a whole bunch of archers scattered around the arena walls. In my experience, you need to dart past the knight, up the stairs, take out the archers quick while the knight fires some seriously formidable magic at you. Honestly, it is some savage shit. He may seem like a pure melee build, but he hurts. Once the archers are down, you can just kill the knight with a few soul arrow shots from on top of the bridge. Luckily, he's weak to magic, or maybe just weak in general, so it does crazy good work and only takes a few hits to kill him. As an aside, I know the whole point of this proto-iron golem is to punch his ankle until he falls over, at which point you can teabag him to death, but I honestly never managed to do that because the shockwaves from his feet stunned me frequently enough for the archers to kill me. I just ended up playing it safe, and weirdly I feel like I missed out. Now, I've beaten this guy twice, and I tell you, I still have absolutely no idea how to dodge this flamethrower. A part of me just took it that it meant you were never supposed to get close, like this boss was specifically for ranged fighting only, but there must be some way to get past it. This flamethrower fills the entire tunnel and basically insta-kills you like the dragon on the bridge, or so it appears to, and I never even bothered to try and skip past it. I've watched speedruns of this game and I must have seen something, but for some reason I just seem to have blacked out before the fight and come to immediately afterwards because I totally draw a blank on it. He's shockingly weak to magic though, so overall he was no big deal. He hits super hard for an opening boss too. Even coming in at level 120, his ranged attacks would wipe enough health off me that he gave me a real run for my money. And the collisions felt really weird and sort of ethereal to the point that I never really noticed myself taking damage until things were getting dicey. Just this strange lack of haptic feedback that ended up making this boss really tough by sheer virtue of the fact that I just didn't notice it was happening. I fought this guy at such a range that I still can't really figure out what he's supposed to look like. Just some distant cluster of vaguely grey metallic polygons with an angry face. I know this guy is pretty infamous for being a huge problem, but he's weak to magic, so I didn't struggle with him much. I think a lot of his perceived difficulty also has to do with the fact that a lot of people restore their human form to try and get through the grueling run-up down the mine, past the lava pits, into the bowels of the earth. However, they just end up dying and make their world tendency worse and worse and worse, thereby making his attacks stronger and stronger and stronger, until even his lightest attacks eviscerate you. He's pretty quick too, so you can't just cart him around while you get a bunch of free hits in. I actually remember the fight being quite intense and dynamic, surprisingly so for a game where most of the bosses are slow, lumbering behemoths. So it was a fun surprise. Writing this, it has occurred to me that the old hero and Penetrator are both two very quick bosses, but considering their crippling weakness to magic, we all know where they stand in my estimations. Like the armoured spider, I had absolutely no idea how to get close to this guy. Every time I approached him, there would be this rain of fire and I would just be dead immediately. In fact, I couldn't get this guy at all without the help of Bior. For some reason, that motherfucker can sit in the fire all day and take the most incremental damage. I remember watching him valiantly storm the keep only to get absolutely blasted and take like 6 points of damage. So in the end I sacrificed Bior to distract the dragon and charged under him into the safety of the castle. Despite the insta-kill opening, this boss fight slows to an absolute crawl and becomes insanely boring. When you're under his head, you're immune to any attacks he can do, but he's got buckets of HP, and you're not guaranteed to hit him while he's flailing his head around, so it takes ages to whittle him down. Honestly, I'd look out onto the battlefield while popping an Old Spice and just see Bior screaming and rolling around, yelling valiant war cries as he was incinerated by this big lizard over and over again. This fight has a really unfortunate balance of being both super hard and super boring, so I don't rate it highly in terms of enjoyment. Bior had fun though. The name of this boss is pretty deceiving because, as many of you will know, it's not her that makes this fight so difficult. I was too out of range to just pelt this bag with soul arrows, and I didn't have enough stats to wield even the most basic bow, so I had to go balls to the wall and fight Garl one-on-one. Garl is the prototype for my favourite main game Dark Souls 2 boss, Velstat, except he's a third of the size and a third of the fun. He has an absolutely excruciating amount of health, and he can heal himself, which is frankly insulting and probably one of the biggest moments of despair I've felt in this game. I've heard conflicting reports that he's both weak to and resistant to magic. Either way, it took me tens of firestorms to finally see this big dinosaur out. The risk of course being that he could crush me with a single swing of his hammer. It was a very stressful war of attrition, and with magic was not that particularly fun or dynamic. And don't get me started on his sister. This guy is an absolute head case, a killing machine, a gun with legs. I've honestly never fought a boss that could steal my soul level before. I mean, this fellow is susceptible to magic, especially firestorms and other area of effect spells, but he is fast and he is very, very strong. He killed me a lot, basically, and very, very immediately too. And he took loads of my levels, which I'm still quite salty about. Honestly, I left him until the absolute last, and even then he gave me more trouble than he was worth. He's got some top music though. I often hear it playing as background music on YouTube video essays, and it always takes me ages to remember what it's from. So, I want to tell you a story. Before I started this game, I did a lot of build research and not much else. I knew only one thing: Firestorm. Firestorm would be the ace up my sleeve, and all I needed to do was reach Yuria the Witch. And I knew that you needed to beat an archdemon to access the fog after the Tower Knight, beyond which Yuria could be met and recruited. So, I had to pick myself an archdemon. The Dragon God and the Storm King both sounded terrifying, ironically. I was also fresh off the heels of my first run through Blighttown, and I couldn't bring myself to venture down into the Valley of Defilement just yet. Finally, I heard that the old monk lived at the top of this so-called Tower of Latria. Well, well, well. Beating up old men is easy, I thought. I guess I'll go with that. And as I learned, I wasn't technically wrong. The old monk is very easy. It's a very manageable fight. What's not so easy? The Maneaters. Bar Bloodborne's Father Gascoigne and my pre-ADP days of Dark Souls 2, the Maneaters were the biggest roadblock to me in any Souls game. They have probably the most varied and hard-hitting moveset in the entire game, blending melee, ranged, and magic attacks, able to stun and knock me off the bridge without warning or remorse. They absolutely wiped the floor with me, over and over and over again, even at level 120. I even tried to kill one through the fog wall with a bow and arrow before entering the boss room. I saw him taking the impact of the 500 arrows I had bought and fired into him, but when I stepped through the fog gate, I saw I had done 0 damage. I didn't have the skills to wield the bow, and then I forgot to equip my catalyst, so I got killed straight away. And that's my list. If you agree, no, joking. Hell yeah, bitches, this list isn't over. Alright, I'm sure all but a few of you will have forgotten about this borderline NPC psychopath. This guy is an absolute beast, and I don't know a single person who fought him fairly. He's got one of the biggest health pools in the game, attacks that deal half your health bar in a single hit, he moves at your exact speed, giving you very little opportunities to attack or heal, and he actually tells you not to fight him! When I tried to take him one-on-one, I was outpaced, outwitted, and outmatched. So, pick your poison. Are you gonna chain backstab? Are you gonna parry him to death? Or are you gonna use Toxic Mist? Because I chose Toxic Mist. I ran over to him, cast Toxic Mist, and then absolutely legged it and hid, watching his health tick down to 0 over the course of about 20 minutes. I had to cast 3 or 4 Toxic Mists on this guy. He has an obscene amount of health. I feel like that's the point. I think this boss was genuinely put here to try and make you be a little bit more inventive with your fights. He's completely optional, and he even gives you his drop up front and bids you farewell. He knows he has no business being this much of a tank. In the spirit of Yakuza's Amon family, I honestly think this is a true test of how much you can cheese. I mean, that's my list, and all things considered, if you played the game legit, your opinions are, honestly, probably a good deal more valid than mine, and that's fine by me. This list was just a bit of fun, mainly inspired by the upcoming release of the Demon's Souls remake, so feel free to disagree if you disagree, I suppose. And if you liked the video, please consider dropping a like or even subscribing. If you didn't like the video, that's fine, I don't care. No worries.